At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. The first proof that humanity was a statistical anomaly with a bad sense of humor came in the form of a Jell-O shot. The wobbly, luridly red cube of gelatinized sugar and ethanol sat in the center of a holographic evidence display. It trembled under the sterile lights of an Aetolian high council chamber. A cacophony of recorded sound blared all around it, the screech of tires, the percussive blast of something called death metal, and the high-pitched panic shrieks of 7 alien life forms. The sound physically assaulted the senses, a wave of pure chaos in a room built on millennia of quiet contemplation. Instructor Korvad of the Arvarians stood beside the hologram. His sleek avian humanoid frame was rigid, his head feathers was shifted from deep violet to coppery green, twitching like a faulty antenna. His expression suggested he had gargled the cacophony and still tasted it. Each shriek from the recording caused a sympathetic tremor in his elegant limbs. "On this concoction," Korvad said, his voice a strained croak. "Hirsute, male in a leather vest, offered me as a gesture of interstellar brotherhood. He then challenged me to an arm wrestling contest for the ownership of my survey vessel. He referred to the stakes as pink slips, a term my translator failed to process." The hologram flickered, shifting to a brightly lit community hall filled with humans clapping an unnerving, rhythmic unison. "After that, I narrowly escaped a multi-level marketing cult's empowerment seminar where they attempted to recruit me to sell synthetic protein gel derivatives of questionable legality. They called it an opportunity to be my own boss and live my best life." Another flicker, a dusty background, two heavily muscled humans threw each other into a folding table while a third filmed it with a handheld device. The table splintered with a sickening crack, and I was forced to observe this ritualistic combat, streamed live across their global network for something they called clout. The victor received a belt of synthetic gold. Korvad took a shuddering breath, his talons clicking softly on the polished floor of black volcanic glass. "High Council, my report is unequivocal. Earth is a logical paradox requiring containment, a species-defying study. Their society is a compounding system failure that somehow inexplicably remains operational. Inviting them into the compact would be like inviting a self-replicating typographical error into our primary codex." A tall, unnervingly slender Aetolian at the head of the crescent-shaped council table raised a three-fingered hand. The chamber's ambient hum ceased. "Your emotional testimony is noted, Instructor Korvad," the counselor intoned, the words devoid of warmth, each syllable a perfectly polished stone. "You misunderstood, however, the new purpose of the mission. We have ceased trying to understand humanity." Korvad's feathers ruffled in confusion. "Then what is the purpose? Quarantine? Containment?" "Diagnosis," the counselor corrected him. He gestured to a larger holoscreen behind him. It displayed the silent, inert core of a planetary-scale AI, a nexus of woven light that should have thrummed with pure reason, but was now dark and still. "The Oracle has failed. We tasked it with finding a viable extinction scenario for the human variable, and it ran 9,328 unique simulations." The holoscreen briefly flashed a list of the failed scenarios. Galactic core gamma ray burst, voracious grey goo nanite plague, planetary tectonic destabilization, self-replicating paperclip horde, sentient lawn flamingo uprising. Against each one, a single word glowed in stark red letters. Survival. And every single one, the counselor continued. From gamma ray burst to self-replicating paperclips, humanity survived. This paradox, this utter defiance of statistical probability, forced the Oracle into a state of absolute logical contradiction. It shattered its core programming. It broke our God. A murmur like the sliding of sand went through the council chamber. A chill spread through Korvod's bones, a coldness sharp as the vacuum between stars. The Oracle was the foundation of their entire civilization. We have no need to understand their chaos, the counselor said, his voice echoing in the vast hall. We need to observe it. We must gather raw data from its most potent sources in a controlled environment. Their excessive vitality is a problem turned solution. It is now the key variable in the galaxy's most important diagnostic experiment. The counselor's gaze fell upon Korvad, cold and absolute. You will oversee the selection of the 3 most unpredictable specimens. Libby Sanders considered the simulation of a chain reaction reactor failure an insult to a proper chain reaction reactor failures everywhere. The intended solution, according to the pre-mission briefing she'd mostly ignored, required manipulating theoretical particle physics to recalibrate the containment field. An Aetolian would design such a solution. Theoretical, meticulous, and utterly useless in a real-world mess where the console would be on fire.
This is just lazy,
she muttered to the humming console, patting its side.
You're failing to even melt down properly. Where's the flair, the drama?
Ignoring the frantic alarms and the flashing red lights meant to induce panic, Libby walked to the side of the simulated reactor core. She slapped the wall with the flat of her hand, listening to the resonance. Hollow, cheap plating. With a grunt, she found a seam and yanked. A maintenance panel tore away with a screech of protesting metal. Inside lay a tangle of conduits and power relays, a chaotic map she knew how to read. The Aetolian proctor, observing from a sterile booth, leaned forward, the resonant plates in his throat vibrating with confusion. The human candidate had completely abandoned the control interface. Her profile listed her as a systems expert, a master of logic and code. Her current actions looked more like aggressive, goal-oriented vandalism. Libby's multi-tool was already out. Her hands moved with a speed that made the individual motions indistinct, stripping wires and rerouting connections. She had no need to calculate the decay rate of exotic particles. She just needed to divert power, a lot of it.
Cooling systems underpowered,
she diagnosed aloud.
Class design flaw. All flash, no substance. But the primary power core has energy to spare. Way too much, actually. Compensating for something.
She worked with a hyper-focused intensity. Sparks showered the floors, smelling of burnt sugar and superheated ceramic. The blaring alarms changed their pitch, becoming the shrill squeal of utter electronic confusion, as if the machine itself failed to comprehend what was happening to its insides.
That's a suboptimal emotional response,
Libby told the reactor.
Have you tried cycling your power? Let me help you with that.
She slammed the stripped end of a thick coolant pump cable directly into a primary power bus. The resulting surge was monstrous. Lights flickered across the entire testing facility. The reactor core flooded with a brutally direct but overwhelmingly effective torrent of coolant, groaned, shuddered, and stabilized. The temperature gauge plummeted from imminent vaporization to lukewarm. The alarms fell silent. A wisp of smoke curled from the jury-rigged connection. The solution was ugly. A Frankenstein's monster of bypass safety safeguards and brute force engineering. But it worked. The Aetolian proctor stared at the data feed. Core temperature stable. Energy output, abysmal. System integrity, a nightmare. He typed a single line into his evaluation report.
Methods, appallingly effective.
Moore's quizard tossed the 100-page tome of diplomatic etiquette onto the floor of the simulation chamber. It landed with a soft, unsatisfying thud. Across the polished table, the holographic ambassador of the lithoid, a stoic, honor-bound species of living stone, wavered expectantly. Their culture, the book had droned on, was built on solemnity, meticulous gestures, and 1,000 years of unbroken tradition. It sounded exhausting. "All right, Sparkles," Mars said, leaning forward and lacing his fingers. "Let's cut the foreplay. What's really grinding your gears? And spare me the breach of procedure nonsense. I read the first page of your book. A great cure for my insomnia." The lithoid ambassador remained motionless, its stone face inert, the polished faucets of its mineral body showing no light. "Your insolence is unexpected." "Yeah, I get that a lot." Mars grinned. He had deciphered the basics of the lithoid language in the first 10 minutes by listening to the cadence of the simulation's introduction. He noticed the subtle pauses, the slight shifts in tonal frequency. Their language was a verbal duel hidden beneath layers of formality. The etiquette book was a trap designed to make you play their game. Mars preferred to invert his own, preferably one with more explosions. "You want to talk trade rights?" Mars said, gesturing dismissively. "Boring. I bet your grandpa tells better stories. And what's with the lighting in here? You guys allergic to a nice warm incandescent? Feels like I'm in a hospital for disco balls." The ambassador's stone structure seemed to tighten. "You mock all traditions, all sacred illumination. This is a grave insult." "Is it an insult, or is it just another rotation?" Mars shot back. "Look, I could read from your script. I could bow and scrape and pretend I care about the sacred alignment of your third moon. Or we could be real. You think we're loud, messy upstarts? I think you're so wound up you probably crap diamonds. Let's start there." The Aetolian proctor felt a spasm of anxiety. This was anything but diplomacy. This was something else entirely. He was supposed to evaluate the candidate's ability to build bridges, not burn them down with a flamethrower of sarcasm and then roast marshmallows over the ashes. But then something strange happened. The lithoid ambassador emitted a low, resonant chime, the equivalent of a chuckle. "Your candor is abrasive, yet it possesses honor. You hide behind no false pleasantries." Pleasantries are for people with something to hide," Mars said. "I got nothing. Except maybe a questionable sense of humor and an attention span that makes a gnat look like a Zen master. So the Alliance, you in? Or are you going to stand there looking like a disco ball's midlife crisis?" The ambassador extended a hand made of interlocking luminous faucets. "A display of such supreme confidence, however vulgar, we cannot ignore. We will consider your proposal." A pattern of light shifted across its stone face, a subtle rearrangement of internal luminescence. The hologram was smiling. The proctor typed his report, his fingers trembling slightly. "Strategy analysis, diplomatic chaos theory, success rate, inexplicable." Raven's stone hung motionless in the zero-gravity combat chamber. 3 advanced security drones, sleek chrome predators armed with pulse cannons and kinetic projectors, circled her like sharks. They were faster. They were better armed. They operated exactly as their manufacturer intended. That was their weakness. Machines were predictable. They followed rules. Raven defied rules. The first drone fired a volley of non-lethal energy pellets. Raven angled her body, letting the impacts propel her backward. The pellets stung even through her suit, but pain was just data. She slammed into the far wall, absorbed the shock with her legs, and kicked off.
She used the drone's own attack to build a terrifying amount of momentum. She rocketed across the chamber, a human cannonball in a black combat suit. She collided with the first drone feet first. Her mass accelerated to a high velocity, transferred its kinetic energy directly into the drone's primary weapon housing. The shriek of tearing alloys echoed in the silent chamber, followed by the pop and fizz of shortening electronics. The drone's cannon sparked and went dead. The second drone fired. Raven used the disabled first drone as a shield, then shoved off of it, sending it spinning into the path of the third. While the third drone was momentarily distracted, Raven grabbed the second. It tried to shock her with its electro-prod limbs, but she found a joint, braced herself against the wall, and pulled. The sound was hideous, a high-tech screech of protesting metal giving way. A leg came off in her hands. It was heavy, solid, and perfectly balanced. The drone, now crippled and flailing, was no longer a threat. The third drone, having dispatched the drifting wreck of the first, reacquired her as a target. Too late. Raven, now armed with a club made from its fallen comrade, met its charge with a single, brutal swing. The impact shattered the drone's optical sensors. The acrid smell of burnt capacitors filled the air. Blind and confused, it fired wildly, its plasma bolts scoring molten lines across the chamber walls. Raven ignored it. Her objective was to complete the obstacle course. She holstered the drone leg, grabbed the last malfunctioning drone, and used its remaining thruster power as a makeshift engine, steering it awkwardly toward the finish line. She crossed the line with the deactivated machine slung over her shoulder like a sack of laundry. The Atolian evaluator stared, the resonant plates in her throat agape. He had seen thousands of combat trials. He had never seen anyone use the enemy as a mode of transportation. His report was short. Performance evaluation. Brutal, direct, and demonstrating a flagrant disregard for manufacturer's intended use. While Libby violated physics, Mars violated propriety, and Raven violated a warranty, Evan Richardson confirmed their collective suspicions. He was an insurance policy, far more than a simple stowaway. As a security analyst assigned to the Atolian delegation on Earth, he had seen the raw data, the mission parameters hidden beneath layers of diplomatic jargon. He saw they were collecting lab rats under the guise of recruiting students. So he went to the lead lab rat. "They're lying to you," he told Libby a week before the trials, in the sterile quiet of her workshop surrounded by the dissected corpses of a dozen different toasters. "This is a dissection disguised as an exchange program. They want to see what makes you tick by taking you apart." Libby, ever the pragmatist, had simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the circuit board she was soldering. "So, we need our own analyst on the inside. Someone off the books. Can you fit in my number 3 drone case?" Her ridiculously oversized luggage was, in fact, a custom-built, shielded Faraday cage designed to look like a drone case. A Trojan horse, complete with its own life support and waste recycle. Now, inside that case, surrounded by the low hum of his equipment, Evan was curled around his terminal. A tiny, spider-like drone, one of Libby's own, detached and crawled silently into a service conduit. He patched into an unsecured data port. He was in. He moved through the ship's network like a ghost. He found the Proctor's communication channel easily, listening to their hushed, anxious voices. "The engineer displays a dangerous aptitude for catastrophic improvisation," one voice said, sounding weary. "The diplomat is a linguistic anarchist," said another, a note of hysteria in his tone. "And the soldier treats advanced robotics like disposable cutlery," said a third, the sycophant Evan recognized from the personnel files. "But our final assessment concerns me. The parameters were suddenly altered as per Professor Velren's suggestion." Evan's focus sharpened. He dove into the logs for Raven's trial. There it was. The gravity simulation had increased by a factor of 0.2 Gs. The atmospheric resistance was up by 12%. Small changes, imperceptible to most, but designed to induce fatigue and ensure failure. He traced the command string back to its source. The sycophant. Evan could have exposed him. That was noisy. Instead, he simply corrected the gravity and atmospheric settings back to their baseline.
Then, as a parting gift, he appended a corrupted log file to the evaluator's final report. The next time the ship ran a system-wide diagnostic, the evaluator would be flagged for a full security audit that would keep him buried in paperwork for the next fiscal period. Satisfied, he accessed Libby's personal datapad through the back door they had designed together. He sent a prearranged encrypted message. Phase 1 complete. The system is rigged. We were right. The Lyceum of Celestial Concordance was an architectural marvel, a structure of spun lattices and captured light that soared into the alien sky. They made every human achievement look like a crude drawing in the dirt. The air hummed with a low, constant energy, and the light seemed to flow like water through translucent walls. Well, Mars said, craning his neck. It's a statement, isn't it? Someone's compensating for something.
The energy expenditure for a non-load-bearing structure of this size is obscene,
Libby muttered, her eyes already tracing the glowing power conduits.
The choice was purely aesthetic, sacrificing practicality. All form, no function. I hate it. Good sight lines for the upper levels,
Raven observed, her gaze sweeping the area.
But too many blind spots at ground level. Terrible defensive layout.
Instructor Korvad met them at the main entrance. The sight of them seemed to cause a physical reaction in the Avarian. His head feathers, fanned out in a display of formal greeting, constricted into a tight, anxious bundle. He regarded them the way one might regard a trio of ticking bombs.
Welcome,
he said, the word sounding like a diagnosis.
To the Lyceum. You are the human delegation.
The first official team meeting occurred in a briefing room so sterile it felt like the inside of a microchip. Libby immediately began scanning the room's power conduits with her datapad, muttering about inefficient energy shielding. Mars, testing the room's acoustics, made a series of increasingly elaborate fart noises with his mouth. Raven silently judged the table's structural integrity, concluding she could probably snap it in half with one well-placed strike. As Korvad began a droning, regulations-heavy speech about decorum and expectations, Libby's datapad buzzed. She suddenly activated her comm unit, patching it to a private channel.
Report,
she subvocalized. Evan's distorted voice crackled in her ear.
The welcome wagon has a kill switch. I've already corrected one accidental parameter shift in Raven's trial. This place is a cage, not a school.
Libby's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles whitened on her datapad. She toggled the comm to include Mars and Raven.
Time to introduce our ace.
She forwarded Evan's audio feed. The initial shock was minimal. Mars just raised an eyebrow. Of course, you have a secret plan involving a man in a box. It's very on brand for you. Does he have snacks in there? Raven gave a single slow nod. An unseen asset was just another tool. A useful one. The agreement was swift, a shattered glance between them. Evan was their ghost. Their survival depended on keeping him one.
And any deviation from the established curriculum will be met with severe disciplinary action,
Korvad concluded, his gaze lingering on Mars. Mars grinned. So, no pizza parties? Korvad's feathers twitched violently.
No pizza parties.
The humans' first day at the Lyceum was less an orientation and more a series of small-scale disasters. It began in the cafeteria. The nutritional gel was a bland beige sludge designed for maximum benefit and minimum enjoyment. Libby considered this an act of culinary terrorism.
This is an insult to food,
she declared after one taste, her face contorting.
It's a cry for help. It tastes like beige.
While Mars attempted to explain the concept of sarcasm to a group of literalist gelatins, Libby slipped away to the cafeteria's synthesis control room. The system was elegant, advanced, and laughably insecure. 20 minutes later, the bland scent of nutritional gel was replaced by a new, glorious aroma that wafted through the entire hall. Pepperoni pizza. The smell of grease, spiced meat, baked bread, and Synthetic cheese was an olfactory assault on the unprepared alien senses. The smell slammed into Korvod's senses, triggering a traumatic memory of a human child's birthday party on Earth, a chaotic vortex of screaming, sticky fingers, and a terrifying costumed mouse. He had to be escorted to the infirmary to have his vital signs stabilized. Meanwhile, Mars had caused a minor diplomatic incident. So when I say, "Oh, I just love this beige gel, it's the highlight of my day," what I actually mean is, Mars paused for effect, that I would rather eat my own foot. The gelatins quivered, their semi-solid forms rippling with distress. One of them logged a formal complaint, citing the intentional weaponized of contradictory statements for the purpose of emotional distress and implied auto-cannibalism. Raven, seeking refuge, found the high-gravity training center, a marvel of engineering. It could simulate gravities up to 10 times that of Earth. She found a leg press machine, noted its maximum weight setting with a disappointed sigh, and then looked around for something heavier. Her eyes landed on a deactivated cargo loader servitor. It weighed approximately 3 tons. When a pair of Avarian fitness instructors found her half an hour later, she had the cargo loader balanced on the leg press sled and was performing slow, controlled reps. The heavy gravity made her feel grounded, the pressure in her chest a comforting reality. They stared, horrified, as she casually added their combined body weight to the machine without breaking a sweat. Their report to Korvad simply read, "Human physiology appears to be a violation of biomechanical safety standards." Korvad, his feathers still slicked back from the calming mist administered by the infirmary drone, marched the humans toward the heart of the academy. He led them into the simulation labs, a cavernous chamber where the very air hummed with power. In the center, suspended in a web of energy conduits, was the massive, silent, broken core of the Oracle. The silence was the most terrifying part. It was an emptiness where a god used to be.
"This is why you are here,"
Korvad said. To emphasize his point, he projected the official Earth file onto a massive holoscreen. The screen lit up with a dizzying montage of apocalypses. An asteroid slammed into a blue planet, which then reformed itself, humanity having apparently moved underground. A gray nanite plague consumed a continent, only to be defeated when a human scientist introduced a competing plague that ate the first and then conveniently died of starvation. Zombie outbreaks, rogue AI takeovers, a bizarre scenario involving sentient squid seizing control of the world's oceans. In every simulation, humanity clung to existence with the tenacity of a weed growing through concrete.
"The Academy's Oracle is the finest predictive engine in the galaxy. For 1,000 years, it has guided the Compact. It was our god of logic,"
Korvad said, his voice strained with a grief that transcended frustration. He gestured at the silent core.
"We tasked it with simulating your world's extinction 9,328 times. Then we gave up. When you survived them all, it broke."
He turned to face them, his dark, bird-like eyes burning.
"Forget learning,"
he said, the words sharp.
"You are not students. You are here as data to fix our God. You are living, breathing paradoxes, and it is my job to record your chaos until the Oracle can make sense of it again."
Mars let out a low whistle. "So, we're good at surviving. We broke your magic 8-ball. That's actually pretty metal." Libby stared at the Oracle's core. Her head tilted.
"It's locked in a recursive loop,"
she said softly.
"It encountered a variable it can't quantify. Desperation. It has no model for a mother flipping a car off her kid."
Raven just crossed her arms, her gaze fixed on Korvad.
"So the final exam is exist?"
"Essentially," Korvad sighed, his feathers drooping.
"Your first trial begins tomorrow. Try to leave the planet intact."
The planet was a jungle, and the jungle was screaming. Every leaf, every vine, every blade of alien grass communicated via a high-frequency sonic shriek. A physical assault, a disorienting vibration rattled their bones and made the very light seem to waver with noise. The goal was simple: retrieve a beacon. Korvad expected them to be curled up in the fetal position within minutes. Mars clapped his hands over his ears, his face pale. Ugh. It's like a million tiny aliens all stubbed their million tiny toes at the same time. I think I can hear colors.
My feelings are vibrating.
Raven stated, her voice tight, her usual stoicism strained. Libby, however, tilted her head, a strange look on her face. To her, it was more than noise. It was data, a symphony of information, chaotic but structured.
It's a language,
she said, her voice barely audible over the din.
Echolocation, but an entire ecosystem. They're mapping their world for each other.
She dropped her standard-issue survival pack and tore it apart. Korvad watched on his monitor, horrified.
What is she doing? That's a Class 4 survival kit. The sonic dampeners are in there. They're perfectly calibrated.
Libby ignored the perfectly good sonic dampeners. They were designed to block noise. She wanted to translate it. She salvaged the communicator's microphone, the water purifier's energy cell, and a handful of wires. She slapped them together with adhesive strips from the medkit, creating a bizarre, asymmetrical headset. What is that, an art project? Mars yelled. Are you making a hat?
Audio filter,
Libby grunted, placing the device over her ears.
It will isolate and map the dominant frequencies. It'll turn the noise into a picture.
She flicked a switch, a low hum from the device. Libby's eyes went wide, a grin spread across her face.
Oh, you are beautiful,
she whispered to the screaming jungle. She pointed to their left.
Cliff face 50 meters. The high-pitched shriek is from a type of vine that grows on sheer rock.
She pointed to the right.
And that lower frequency rumble is a patch of thick, swampy ground. We go straight.
Her jury-rigged device translated the planet's screams into a crude but stunningly effective topographic map. They walked, while other alien teams were incapacitated, curled into balls of misery. The humans strolled through the jungle with an eerie confidence, navigating around obstacles they couldn't even see. The cacophony had become their guide. They walked straight to the beacon and were back at the starting point before most teams had managed to crawl 10 feet. In the control room, Korvad stared at the results, then at the image of Libby's hideous, brilliant device. He privately saved the schematic for admiration, not analysis.
They survived the screaming,
he whispered to himself,
and weaponized it.
Deep in the service conduits, Evan Richardson watched the team's progress. He also watched the system watch them. A flicker in the power grid, a tiny surge directed at the human simulation pod. Sabotage, designed to cause a life support malfunction. It would look like an accident. Evan's fingers tapped a rapid sequence across the portable terminal's interface. He was unable to block the surge without revealing his presence, but he could redirect it. His eyes scanned the other active pods. He found one occupied by a team of Avarian bullies, the same ones who had been mocking instructor Korvad in the mess hall. They were rivals of Korvad from a competing academic house. 2 birds, 1 stone. With a few keystrokes, he created a new pathway in the energy grid. The power surge shot down the new route. Alarms blared. The Avarian team's pod emergency ejected them, showering them in harmless but humiliating fire-suppressant foam. The sabotage was logged, but the target was now wrong. Later that day, Libby presented Korvad with Evan's data logs in the quiet of his office.
Your simulation was tampered with,
Libby said, placing her datapad on his desk.
Someone tried to kill us.
Korvad studied the data, his feathers tightening.
This could be a random fluctuation, a system error. The energy signature was shaped,
Libby countered, pointing to a graph.
It was a pulse, not a spike, specifically calibrated to overload a Mark IV life support regulator. It was deliberate, and your rivals just happened to suffer a system error at the exact same moment. The odds of that are astronomical.
Korvad looked at the data again. He saw the attempt on their lives, clear as day, but he also saw the outcome. His most arrogant rivals publicly humiliated. The attack on the humans perfectly masked. He looked up at the three humans. They were a problem, a walking paradox that gave him daily migraines. But they were his problem, and someone else was trying to eliminate them.
I cannot offer you overt support,
he said, his voice low. A dangerous thought began to form in his mind. He could be their ally, shifting from Warden.
The Council would have me decommissioned. But information is something I can't provide. The system logs are now open to you. Find out who is hunting you.
Evan Richardson was the ghost in the machine, but Velrand was the god. While siphoning data from a restricted schematic of the Sim Lab's power grid, Evan tripped a silent alarm, a digital whisper that alerted Velrand's private network instead of the Academy's. He knew it instantly. He was already packing his terminal when the hunter arrived. It was a sleek, spatter-like machine of polished black alloy, its design unmatched by any known Academy schematics. It moved with a silent, unnerving speed, the hiss of its servos barely audible over the hum of the conduits. Its multi-lens optical sensor glowed a flat, analytical blue, one of Velrand's own. A tense pursuit began in the guts of the Lyceum. The drone was faster, its metallic legs scraping against the narrow walls as it chased him. Evan deployed his micro-drones as decoys, leading the hunter on a wild chase through miles of tubing. He scrambled through a series of narrow shafts, the hunter's manipulator arm lashing out, scoring a deep gouge in the metal wall inches from his leg. Ahead, the schematic showed a junction leading directly to a waste disposal chute, a huge risk. He burst into the junction and slapped a control panel, overriding the chute's safety regulations. The chute opened with a blast of compressed air. Evan threw himself into an adjacent crawl space as the spider drone shot past him and tumbled into the darkness. Evan slammed the panel again, sealing the door. He heard a distant metallic crunch as the compactor did its work. He leaned back against the cool metal wall, his heart pounding. He checked his terminal. The drone fell to ping main security. Its final data burst went to an encrypted off-grid server, Velrand's server. He sent an urgent message to Libby. Velrand sent a private hunter. It's gone, but he knows someone's in the walls. He's moved past sabotage. He's hunting. The next simulation was a masterclass in bureaucratic hell on the planet of Ordo. The filing clerisy had elevated paperwork to a religion. The air was dry and smelled of aging paper and static from the data slate chargers. Korvad expected the humans, particularly the chaotic Mars, to be utterly paralyzed. Mars was in heaven. This is less a government, he said with a grin, and more the galaxy's most elaborate filing cabinet. I love it. Their objective was to gain access to the planetary archives, requiring the signature of High Minister Plantar. While Libby tried to hack the planetary network and Raven calculated the load-bearing capacity of the paper-stacked skyscrapers, Mars went to work. He sought regulations, not secrets. He spent an hour charming a low-level clerk with tales of Earth's Department of Motor Vehicles, a concept the clerk found both horrifying and fascinating. He found High Minister Plantar in his office, a vast chamber where documents were stacked to the ceiling. "Minister," Mars said cheerfully, "I'd like to file Form 27B/6, a motion to audit a minister's personal information assets." The minister froze, a data slate slipping from his grasp. That form is obsolete. It's been unused for centuries." Forgotten, not obsolete," Mars corrected him, tapping a line on the form. "According to a procedural loophole in subsection 9, paragraph 4 of your own foundational codex, any citizen can demand a full asset audit to ensure informational parity. And as a temporary citizen for the duration of this simulation, I qualify." The minister stared at Mars, his papery skin turning a pale gray. A full audit would be a bureaucratic nightmare from which his career would never recover.
What do you want?
The minister rasped. Access to planetary archives, Mars said. Just a quick peek. Sign this access form, and I'll make sure Form 27B/6 gets misplaced. Permanently. The minister signed. Back in the control room, Korvad watched the diplomatic complaint from the gelatins pop up on his screen from Mars' first day. He read it, then looked at the results from the Ordo simulation. With a sigh that sounded suspiciously like a chuckle, he dragged the complaint into the digital incinerator. The threat escalated. The setting was a practical xenobiology lecture hosted by the esteemed Professor Valrand himself. The attack felt different now, more a targeted assassination than a random test. Valrand knew about Evan. He was getting desperate. The Razorcat hunts purely by motion, Valrand explained, his voice smooth as silk. The creature paced in its energy cage, a beautiful, lethal thing of living mineral, its every movement silent and predatory. To its senses, anything that moves is prey. Anything still might as well be a rock. As he spoke, he suddenly gestured toward a control panel. The energy cage vanished. The creature lunged for Mars, who was, of course, fidgeting. Raven moved. She shoved Mars and Libby aside and planted herself directly in the beast's path. She stood perfectly, absolutely still. The Razorcat screeched to a halt inches from her face, its razor-sharp claws extended, confused. It saw a shape, but it registered no motion, no prey. Raven stared back, her breathing slow and even, her gaze locked on the creature's mineral eyes. She asserted her dominance as a rival predator, refusing the role of prey. The standoff, which lasted only a second but felt like an eternity, was broken by Libby. Scrambling to her feet, she ripped a high-energy specimen lamp from its socket and aimed the powerful beam directly into the Razorcat's light-sensitive eyes. The creature shrieked, blinded and disoriented. Security arrived and subdued it. "A dreadful malfunction," Valrand declared, rushing to the panel. "The cage's power source must have failed." But they saw it. The subtle gesture, the calm expression on his face as the creature lunged. They knew it was deliberate. Later, huddled in their quarters, Mars was still shaken. "Okay, that was a little too close." "You need to stop fidgeting," Raven stated, her voice flat. "It's how I think." "Think stiller," she advised. With Korvad's access codes, Libby and Evan launched a full-scale digital assault on the Academy's secure servers. They found the ghost procedures, the anomalous code running beneath the standard operating system. It was designed to mask power surges, delete error logs, and create blind spots. They showed the code to Korvad. He went pale, his feathers losing their color. "By the first calculation," he whispered, "I've seen this before. It was Valrand's student thesis, a theoretical project on integrated system architecture. It was brilliant, but deemed too powerful, too easily corruptible to practical use. The project was sealed. He designed more than the simulations." Libby realized, her voice low. "He built the very foundation they run on. That's his digital signature." Korvad stumbled back into his chair, a terrible memory surfacing, a fragment of gossip he had dismissed at the time. "The rumors. After the Oracle went silent, Valrand was the last one to interface with it. They said he was in there for hours. They said it showed him something that broke more than just its logic, something that broke him." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Valrand was more than a purist. He was a man driven by a terrible secret, a prophecy whispered to him by a dying god. "The final exam," Korvad choked out, his eyes wide with terror.
the integrated scenario for the entire student body. It's more than another trial. It's his platform.
The day of the final exam arrived. Valran took the stage in the grand assembly hall, his voice calm and reassuring. "Today, you will face the ultimate test," he announced, a benevolent smile on his face. "An integrated scenario, campus-wide, designed to test everything you have learned about adaptation, cooperation, and survival. It will be your finest hour." He raised a hand. "Let the final examination begin." He activated it. It was real. Crimson emergency lighting bathed the halls in a blood-red glow. Heavy Duracell bulkheads slammed down with the finality of a tomb. The hard lighting emitters flickered to life, projecting solid, weaponized constructs instead of holograms. The cages in the xenobiology labs unlocked with a chorus of metallic clicks. Valran's voice, transformed from calm professor to haunted prophet, echoed from the comm system. "The Oracle did more than fail. In its final moments, it showed me the future. A future shaped by your human chaos. Disorder is too simple a word, an unraveling of physical law, the death of stars, the end of reality itself. I am a surgeon attempting to prevent a cosmic apocalypse. I will create one undeniable data point where humanity loses. I will save us all by ensuring you die." The trap was sprung. The final exam was real. The subject was survival. Libby and Korvad were trapped in the Sim Lab's server room. Valran's purge procedure, a rogue AI, was systematically deleting safety systems, its progress displayed in rapidly scrolling lines of deletion code on the main screen.
"It's deleting the coolant regulators from the primary core!"
Korvad shrieked, his talons skittering across a console as his commands were immediately rejected.
"He's going to overload the entire campus power grid! We'll all be vaporized! Logic is failing,"
Libby yelled, shoving him aside.
"So let's try insanity. You can't brute force a recursive logic gate protected by a sentient purge algorithm."
Korvad screeched, his voice hitting a pitch only small rodents should be able to achieve. "Watch me," Libby muttered. She ignored the keyboard. She grabbed a maintenance ladder and scrambled up, wrenching a heavy plasma conduit from its magnetic clamp. Power arced through the air, filling the room with the scent of superheated ceramic and hot metal.
"What are you doing?"
Korvad wailed.
"That's the primary feed for the environmental controls!"
"Exactly," Libby yelled back. She swung the heavy conduit, smashing it into a junction box that fed the Purge AI's physical server bank.
"It's trying to overload the core by cutting the coolant, so I'm going to overload it!"
She jammed the sparking end of the conduit into the junction. The Purge AI, designed for the elegant world of code, was hit with a raw tsunami of physical energy. Its servers sparked, smoked, and then exploded in a shower of sparks and molten plastic. The red alert icons died. The chain reaction stopped. Libby slid down the ladder, covered in soot.
"See? Brute force."
Korvad stared at the smoking ruin of a multi-trillion credit server bank.
"Your methods,"
he whispered in awe,
"are appalling."
Mars was trapped in the main library with several dozen terrified alien students. Hard light walls made of pure energy were smashing through the windows. Panic was a tangible thing in the air, a scent of fear and confusion.
"Everyone, calm down,"
a gelatinous student blobbled.
"We're all going to be disintegrated."
"Yeah, probably," Mars yelled, climbing onto a reading table. But let's refuse to make it easy for them. Look at these things. They're just angry disco lights. Who's with me? His voice, filled with a bizarre, infectious confidence, cut through the fear. You! Mars pointed at a group of small insectoid beings clinging to the ceiling. You guys stick to things, right? Knock over those top shelves. Create a barrier. The insectoids chittered and immediately went to work, sending massive shells of data slates crashing to the floor. You! He pointed at a tall, plant-like alien. You emit calming pheromones when you're stressed, correct? Get stressed. Be the emotional support ficus the revolution needs. The plant alien, flustered, began to release a sweet-smelling pollen that had a noticeable calming effect. He organized the students into a surprisingly effective resistance force, turning the library from a death trap into a fortified stronghold. Mars, the linguistic anarchist, had become the accidental general of the Library Liberation Front. The Academy Quad was a death trap. Velran had cranked the localized gravity to 3 times normal. Automated defense turrets fired live plasma rounds at anything that moved. For Ravenstone, it was just leg day. The pressure in her chest was a familiar weight, the creak of her own bones a grounding sensation. She crouched behind the shattered base of a large statue, timing the turret fire patterns. She saw her opening, a fractional second gap. In a single explosive burst of pure, focused strength, she moved. She grabbed a solid metal bench that now weighed close to a ton. With a guttural roar, she ripped it from its moorings, concrete dust exploding from the ground. She spun once and hurled the bench like a javelin. It smashed directly into the primary turret controlling the quad's main exit, demolishing it in a spectacular explosion of metal and light. "Mach," she said into her comm, her voice completely calm. The opening was clear. The other students scrabbled through the gap to safety. Raven picked up a large chunk of the fallen statue and began her slow advance on the next turret. Evan Richards was the Academy's central nervous system. He fought a digital war. He was unable to beat Velran's master code head-on, but he could sow chaos. He triggered sanitation bots to clog corridors and activated fire suppression systems to create diversions. He was also hunting. He probed Velran's ghost procedures, searching for a weakness and exploit. And then he found it, a beautiful, stupid piece of bureaucratic streamlining. The public address linguistic filter, the system that translated campus-wide announcements, shared a processing queue with a manual override authentication server to save on resources. A tiny flaw, a single point of failure in a perfect system. He had his weapon. He fed a constant stream of tactical data to his team, guiding them, clearing their path, setting the stage for the final act. Libby, Power Conduit 7 Gamma is unstable. You can use it to short the lockdown on the east wing. Mars, security patrol of sanitation bots approaching your position in 2 minutes. The dumb, use them as cover. Raven, turret 5 is a blind spot every 5.3 seconds on its lower left quadrant. Guided by Evan's digital breadcrumbs, the team converged on the central control tower. They found Velran on the observation deck, surrounded by his personal guard drones, a look of serene, tragic purpose on his face as he watched the destruction unfold on the holoscreens below. "Impressive," Velran said without turning. "You have survived far longer than the projections indicated. It seems the Oracle underestimated your resilience." He turned to face them. His expression was that of a weary savior who had seen the end of all things, not a cackling villain. "You see this as destruction. I see it as desperate calculation. The Oracle showed me a universe where your chaos unravels the very fabric of space-time. A reality where everything we have ever known dissolves into screaming, meaningless entropy. Your survival is a death sentence for the galaxy, not a victory." "You're a murdering psychopath," Mars yelled. "Am I?" Valran's voice was dangerously soft. Or am I the only one willing to do the terrible, necessary work to prevent it? I will deny you the power to end everything. I will restore the Oracle's faith. I will correct the anomaly. The final battle was a symphony of pure humanity.
Go!
Raven yelled and charged, leading the militia Mars had rallied. They slammed into Valran's guard drones, a chaotic melee of crushing blows and plasma fire that drew the attention of Valran and his security. While the physical battle raged, the real takedown began. A message from Evan flashed on Libby's datapad.
It's time. Corvad, start the pings. Mars, get to the PA. Break its brain.
From his hiding spot, Corvad initiated a system-wide diagnostic, forcing Valran to manually input an override code every 30 seconds. Valran growled in frustration, his attention split. Mars grabbed the microphone for the Academy-wide PA system. He made no heroic speech. He took a deep breath and yelled, his voice booming across the entire campus.
Hey, Valran, your entire plan is a total flagnard.
The word hit the public address linguistic filter, flagnard, an untranslatable recursive logic bomb. The filter, trying to process the nonsense, began to hog the entire processing queue it shared with the authentication server. On Valran's console, the override prompt lagged, the system struggling to authenticate his commands against Corvad's pings. That lag was all Evan needed. The overloaded queue had momentarily dropped a single firewall. Evan executed one single elegant command. Execute, lockout, procedure, admin, Omega. On the control deck, Valran's console went dead. A single message appeared on his screen. Administrator privileges revoked. He was locked out of his own system. The crimson lockdown lights flickered off. The hard light constructs vanished. The turrets retracted. Moments later, ships belonging to the Aetolian High Council descended. They found Professor Valrand standing frozen before his locked console. They arrested him without a fight, his own system logs providing a complete confession of his every action, and a chilling record of the Oracle's final, terrifying prophecy. In the subsequent hearing, the instructor Corvad stood before the High Council. His feathers were arranged with a strange, new, almost chaotic confidence, lacking their usual twitch of anxiety.
The methods are illogical,
he declared, his voice ringing with conviction.
The procedures are non-existent. The solutions are, frankly, appalling.
He paused, letting the words hang in the air.
The Aetolian Compact would have failed to survive this without them. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the stunned council members. Professor Valran used our own logic, our own perfect systems against us. He created a problem that logic could not solve. All rigid order failed. Their chaos, adapted.
One of the counselors leaned forward.
But their actions caused billions in damages. They prove Valran's point about their destructive nature.
No, Corvan countered, his voice sharp.
They proved a system that can be bent and repaired is better than a system so rigid and perfect that its only state of failure is to shatter. They saved our academy and prevented its breaking.
He stood up straighter.
I am officially recommending the reclassification of the Human Diagnostic Program. It is now a permanent and mandatory cultural exchange program.
Weeks later, the Lyceum of Celestial Concordance was scarred but functional. The repairs were a strange patchwork of sleek Aetolian tech and Libby's ugly, brutally direct fixes bound with an industrial adhesive she had synthesized from the cafeteria's polymer trays. The four humans were at their usual table in the newly pizza-friendly cafeteria. They were, to their collective annoyance, celebrities. I'm telling you, the synthesizer needs to learn how to make a decent burrito, Mars argued. It's a foundational food group.
The structural integrity of a tortilla is suboptimal for nutrient delivery.
Libby countered, sketching a blueprint for a more effective food delivery cylinder on a napkin.
A bowl offers better structural integrity.
Raven just shrugged, taking a large bite of what appeared to be a whole roasted space chicken. Food is fuel. A small spider-like drone scuttled onto the table, its speaker emitting Evan's distorted voice.
Shawarma. The correct answer is shawarma.
Instructor Korvad approached their table, holding a datapad. He looked calmer, less prone to existential terror.
A new course has been approved for the upcoming semester,
he announced stiffly.
Recent events inspired it.
He showed them the datapad. The course title read, Applied Chaos Theory and Advanced Risk-Taking Behavior. Mars grinned and flicked a tater tot across the table. Without looking, Korvad's hand shot out, his talons snatching the fried potato morsel from the air. He examined it with an expression of intense academic curiosity, then popped it into his mouth. He chewed thoughtfully. He almost smiled. The humans had become the system's newest, most unpredictable, and most essential feature.